As requested, we've got a follow-on video to the comparison between the T200, P790 and ZX5 heads, and we've got the T150, ZX7 and the P770. So we're going to do a little bit of a talk through the comparisons on these heads, what differentiates them and what you'll see from a flight point of view. And we'll start with P770. So P770 is the sort of toned down version of the P790. So it's a lot of the same sort of tech in it. We've still got the floating face, still got the cutaway through slot in the sole. We've still got the maraged face on it. Still got some tungsten weighting in the sole. This one needs a standard on the back because that's our standard weight model. We've got a lighter and a standard weight here. But where it differentiates from the P790 is there's a progressive center of gravity which works at lower into the longer runs, higher into the shorter runs to help with ball flight and launch. And really it's designed to retain a bit more launch and spin than P790. So what we're going to do, hit a few shots of this, I'll go on to the next model and then we'll compare that. And after that we'll have a look at the data and show what you expect to see out of them. So P770, as like the 790, P series, player series model, still quite a neat compact head shape. So they've kept the shaping very, very traditional in that respect. This one, because it's got the hollowed out cavity, it's got the speed foam air in it, which is 69% lighter than the previous version. That then allows them to fill the head, tone the sound down, and we've got a bit of a support for the face as well. So this one, being the hollow head, will have a little more of a click. So I've got a little high on the face, but still plenty of launch on it, and that's one of the aspects you're going to see out of this 770 head. So whilst I've hit that horrendously, it's actually kept a little bit of flight onto it. If I can get one out the centre. So a little bit more of a click off the face than I think we'll find off the other two. You can really sense where that centre of gravity sits low, but that helps to get a little bit of elevation. The one difference with this, the 790 being more of a different distance model, is going to take a bit more spin off. So really designed for a little bit more punch, a little bit more of a hot ball flight. This one designed just to keep that flight up a little bit more. But all around, across the face, really quite a solid head. So I'll switch that over next. We'll move into the T150. So again, each of these being kind of player style head with a little bit of punch. So a little less, I'm going to say the word game improvement really, but there's a bit less designed for speed and just raw yardage. So T150, very, very successful since its launch a couple of months ago. They've got a stiffened frame, stiffened bar across the bottom, high density tungsten in the sole. So plenty in there they can get that center of gravity down a little bit. Instead of the through slot in the sole, as we'll see in the top here, if that's visible, that little bit of a slot behind the face. So that thins it out, allows that sort of bottom half of the face to stay a little bit thinner, gets a little bit more movement, a little more flexion, maintains a bit more ball speed, so it makes this a bit better low on the face. Each of these is exactly the same loft, so we're comparing like for like in that respect. But essentially this is Titleist version of the 770, very similar products. The T100S, the model before, was quite a punchy, got a flat launch. So this one is certainly, it's a little bit more top line visible than the previous model, a little bit more sole width. They've gone to the Vokey design guys to have a look at the sole profile and how the turf interaction works. So they have adapted it a little bit and made it just look a little bit more user friendly. So let's change that notification over so we log it under the right batch of shots. So I would say down behind the ball, visually quite a similar head to the 770. Now that this has got that little bit more top line, this slightly wider top line, so a little bit closer to the TaylorMade head, but still very, very clean, very traditional looking, which Titleist have done well to maintain with these series. So pretty solid feel. That's one of the things that the whole Titleist range, this model, has, with that high density tungsten either side. The club head really feels like it stays with the shot. This one, generally speaking, whilst has a little more launch than the 100S, is a bit stronger than the 770 for a flight point of view. So it's coming out just a little bit flatter on launch. Still really good ball speed. That one faded a little bit, so it maintained a little bit more spin, but definitely designed for lower mid launch, but not a cannon on spin rate. So very, very solid feeling head. I think that's one of the differences of that bar across the center and it being all kind of semi kind of hollowed out rather than the whole head. It's a little bit of a more solid sound, more solid feel rather than the slightly hollower sound of the 770. And then we'll move on to the Srixon ZX7. So whilst this still has some of the tungsten in the sole, they've put a little bit of tungsten in the toe end. They've incorporated into this head, which you can see if you look at the very toe end of it, right on the toe, there's a little bit of a different colour. So that's where you can see the tungsten sits into the sole. So that again gets centre of gravity down. Wait a little bit into the toe to get the centre of gravity central on the head as well, rather than onto the heel side. But this is more of a one-piece head. Unlike the T150 and the 770, there isn't a floating face or a fast face involved. It's got what they call pure frame, so that markings in the back, it's almost like a Y shape, is a thicker area on the head. And that puts mass behind the strike point. So we've got a little bit of lead tape on this just to get the balance in line with the other two from a testing point of view. But really what that's designed to do is to put the mass behind the strike point, makes it feel a little bit more solid, in principle for energy transfer as well. With Srixon, what they've done with this series is that sole shape. So you can see the angling on the sole there. It's designed to give a little bit more bounce on the front edge and then a bit of relief on the backside so that it stops the leading edge digging, but then the back head skids through the turf and it maintains club speed through the turf, improves turf interaction, and there are some progressive grooves on the face as well. So they're slightly different in the short irons to in the long irons to optimise spin in the shorter irons and getting dirt and moisture and debris away from the contact in the mid to longer irons as well. So just a designation over here. Now, the Srixon heads over the last few series have been very, very efficient at bringing spin down slightly. So that's something for the last 2 or 3 models. We've seen that reduction in spin. It's over heads of a similar construction. They've been brilliant at keeping the spin 200 or 300 revolutions lower than other models. And that's something that we've seen with this head as well. Yeah, very, very similar top line again to the 770. Titleist have a little bit more of an angling on the top edge so it looks a bit thinner, whereas Srixon and TaylorMade have flattened it off, which shows you the whole top edge. So they look slightly wider on the top line, but again, very, very similar heel to toe, maybe slightly longer on the Srixon than the other two. But real well-made forged head. So because it hasn't got that cavity element to it, it's a very solid feeling head. So you haven't got the weight, massive amount of weight out either side of the face, or an internal cavity like the TaylorMade, which changes the sound quite a bit. And this is just a one-piece head where there's no, I won't say no tech, but there isn't that maraged face, that thinner face that makes the clickier sound. I thought a lot of players who are used to a single-piece forged head like an MB or a CB head will like the feel of. So, ball speed-wise, still very solid, but I'll go into the data now and we'll look at where they compare to one another. I will just filter those one shot with the TaylorMade that was a horrendous strike, which wouldn't be fair to keep that one in there. But looking at the screen now, what we can see is the progression in launch angle and the progression in spin between the 3 models. So the top set of shots are with the ZX7. So you can see club speed within a mile an hour or 2 of one another. Ball speed very similar. So actually the ZX7 very, very efficient for me on ball speed. And so even though it hasn't got the floating face and the marage material in there to maximise ball speed, I still get a very efficient contact out of it. More efficient, one might say, than the other two. But launch angle at 15 and spin at 4,500. What we can see there is you compare that to the T150, which is at 15.8 launch and 4,700 on spin. It's almost a degree more launch and a couple of hundred revs of spin more. Actually, just to highlight this, I'm going to add in the land angle to these as well. So what that's done is you've got a 44 degree, well, I've got a 44 degree land angle with the Srixon, which is, for where my ball speed is a bit on the flatter side. I'll be looking for a bit more flight and spin than that. With the T150, I'm at 45.7, and then going to the 770, picked up another degree or so on launch angle there. Only 70 revs of spin over the T150, so the launch angle's kicked up more than the spin, but that's picked up the land angle 2 and a bit degrees. So quite a big differential on flight there for the battery shots that I've hit, but I'd certainly be looking to see that progression on launch and spin from these 3 heads. So essentially what you don't necessarily get is you don't necessarily always get, as you go up in tech on the heads, a huge upkick in ball speed from something with this sort of thinner, faster face, because if the mass is in a better position for you, so for me on this one being 4 degrees down, a little bit of shaft lean, the Srixon has produced a really efficient ball speed. What it has done is brought the flight down, and actually for me that's a little bit low, whereas for a lot of players who flight it and spin it a bit too much, if you're not looking for something that feels massively forgiving, the Srixon's a great head for bringing that flight down without having to drag loft massively down. Flip side, if you get a lower launch of the ball that you don't need to flare spin up, then the P770 gives a great little bit extra ball flight for that kind of player to kick that launch up and get the land angle steeper. So, the T150 sits right there in the middle ground. It retains a nice amount of spin proportionate to launch angle, but doesn't let the launch angle kick up too much. So as the center of gravity of the heads, as the tech progresses through the heads, you really can dial in the flight with different models. As we can see here, 4 degree, best part of 4 degree land angle difference. That's really quite a large change with no change in loft, just from the construction of the head. So hope that gives a bit of a pointer into how those heads perform, what the tech is behind them, and from a ball flight point of view, what they're going to do depending on which one you choose for your game.